Oh, test. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
Fixed it.
This is great.
Okay.
This is clean.
Awesome.
All right.
Okay.
You hear us?
You got it. So,
Kevin goes one last try. Hail Mary.
okay.
All right. So
This is
welcome.
why Unfriended didn't have people in their forts.
You
Are
are you literally going to hold that for a
Nope.
whole hour and a half?
We got to figure out a better idea.
Kevin,
Um,
you planned it all along just for dramatic effect. I can tell.
Yeah.
I know you.
Yeah.
Why don't you pull the chair back, put this laptop down there, and just set that on top of the chair? So do this. Okay.
I
All
was going to say you can sit here.
No. Oh,
Take
brother.
a picture of the settings now.
All right. So, okay, very good. So, at long last, we lost it.
Woohoo!
Welcome to Into the Abyss.
To that one,
Yeah.
to that one viewer, we apologize. Sorry.
You
but
just
it's
entered the abyss.
Cemetery Dance Publications, and I'm so important that I'm on the screen twice. So, from two different angles. Chuck, want to take a minute to introduce yourself?
Let me get my good side.
You
Side.
get
I'm C.W. Breyer. I'm the author of Whispers from the Depths and also Sticks and Stones.
Tom, introduce yourself, please.
I'm Tom McDonough, and I'm not a writer.
No, but he is a horror aficionado, and that's when we love him.
And a history teacher.
And a history
So I like
teacher.
how that works in the
Yes,
story.
it does work out well being a history teacher, but also being a horror aficionado. Tom is the one who comes up with little bits of trivia, and he's also kind of our I don't want to say expert on classic horror, but if there's someone who knows his classic horror better than us, it would be Tom. So, Daniel, why don't you take a minute and introduce yourself?
I'm the guy who's so bright. I just thought you had two posters of the Incredible Hulk and wasn't. So I'm just going to be. I'm the guy who's going to be showing off his intellectual skills all night tonight, and I'm the author of The Serpent's Shadow, out September 12th from Cemetery Dance.
All right, and Luisa.
I'm Luisa Colon. I'm the author of Bad Moon Rising, which just came out August 11th.
Very good. So here we are at Into the Abyss, and for those of you guys who have watched or haven't watched before, it's kind of a very loose, relaxed show. Basically, we like to refer it to as three guys who are sitting and eating and drinking and talk about horror, and the camera just happens to be on. Generally, the pregame show is a little bit more organized than what you just saw. Usually what we do is we flip the cameras on at 7 o'clock, and then people can kind of peek behind the scenes and see, what we're talking about, what our topics were for tonight. We didn't get a chance to plan those, but that's okay. We're just kind of run right into them. So we've done our introductions. We also usually like to share our libations for the evening, because our old slogan for Into the Abyss, I don't know if it's going to be our new slogan. Don't forget to grab mine too. Our old slogan for Into the Abyss was eat, drink, and be scary. Yeah, it's not. We actually had shirts made up. Tom's actually wearing the shirt that he made up for us. So usually, all right. So Chuck is carrying over here a bottle of liquor that's literally in a bubble wrapped bag. So I have no idea what that's all about. So we like to talk about what it is we're going to be partaking of tonight.
It's the Deacon, and it's
it's got a plague doctor
themed whiskey.
Where's it from? Like why is it in I've never seen a.
That's how they ship it.
To go on the plane.
Yeah.
Wow. What is it?
It is it's sourced from Scotland, but it's an American-made Scotch whiskey.
Oh, very cool. All right. Why don't you grab mine over there? So tonight I will be enjoying, when I get off the camera. Actually, do you want to pour me one?
Yeah.
There's ice right there, so you can pour me one.
Yeah.
So I picked up this recently, Horse Soldier. Tom, you know a little bit the history behind Horse Soldier?
Well, not the liquor itself,
But you know what the references too, yes.
Well, yeah, actually, I was thinking back to the 1980s, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, the Mujahideen, and how American Special Forces worked with the freedom fighters, and they still fought on horseback, which you think would not work against tanks and all that, but in that rugged country, yes. And Kevin just told me during I'm just going to say the latest incursion, but when we were in Afghanistan, you said they had soldiers, most likely special forces, who were working with local forces, still using horses.
And Horse Soldier is distilled by them, and if the unless the liquor guy was lying to me and just wanted me to get me to buy this bottle. They distill it, and a lot of the proceeds go toward veterans, in need. Tom has got Release the
Kraken
Release
attacks New York.
New York.
Yes, it is a dark spice rum. I'm drinking it with some Coke. I love the back of it. Basically, it's talking about all of New York, of how there's Unleashed from the depths of the ocean.
Get this from Grandpa? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Going over Niagara Falls, unfurling throughout the Finger Lakes, and crushing hot dog eating contests in Coney Island.
Wow.
Really gives you a nice little kick. It's
I
wonderful
like
stuff.
Is that like Mars Attacks?
No, it's the Kraken.
No, but look at the label. Look at the attacks. It looks like the Mars Attacks
Okay,
label.
I mean, yeah, they probably got the idea from that.
I've also got this Pepto Ball.
What is that from Grandpa?
Yeah,
I mean, did they bring Grandpa's
This is an experiment.
moon still?
I melted cream savers in Malibu rum.
Oh my God!
You're going Anton Kanker level.
Yeah.
Anton, he just bruises. What is that over there?
Oh, this
looks
is
like
speaking of Grandpa,
Mississippi mud moonshine.
Werther's Originals melted in the Sinistar cinnamon whiskey.
That's why you were posting about buying Werther's Originals earlier this week.
Wow.
You're an engineer and a
A distiller. Yeah. So, are you guys drinking anything noteworthy this evening?
I whipped something up. It's almost gone now.
Well, we gave you good reason to.
Really drove
She
her
wasn't
to
going to
that.
drink at all until we had the whole technical issues.
This is juice. I made it up. It's juice, whiskey, and chunks of orange floating around.
Oh, different sangria. Yeah.
Nice.
What about you, Daniel? Are you drinking anything tonight? Or are you flying abstaining this evening? Flying.
Well, maybe both. I brought something for show and tell. In another world, I'd be drinking it. This is, let's see if I can get it close to there. This is, we'll teach everyone mine tonight. This is what's called Zabentum. It is both a Mayan flower and a distilled Mayan honey liqueur. I got a bottle of it down in the Yucatan because it plays a role in the Serpent Shadow. But I won't be drinking it because I am on heavy medication for my many illnesses. So I'm going to be a Diet Coke person tonight.
Oh, okay.
What
All right.
process?
And I probably actually should give my clarification that I gave last time, just in case we have any new viewers.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give my clarification just in case we have any new viewers. Many of you that follow up me on Facebook may have noticed that I've spent the last year not drinking anything, and I decided to take a year off of drinking. So I didn't want anyone to think that suddenly I'd fallen off the wagon or anything like that. But
I pushed them off.
Yeah.
But it became very clear throughout my break from alcohol that it wasn't so much about completely abstaining for the rest of my life. I was just looking for a healthier relationship with alcohol. So when I reached the 1 year part, I started to work it back into my routine a little bit. And it's interesting. I can say how your body changes after you abstain from something for a really long time and go back to it. You know, that after not drinking for a year, going back to drinking, I've certainly enjoyed drinking again, but I enjoy it much differently than I used to because a lot has changed in taking the year off.
And meanwhile, I'm drinking this pink stuff.
You're right. Meanwhile, you're melting Pepto-Bismol and
Pretty much.
all I know is if you had told me that was Pepto-Bismol and Everclear, then I would have been a little concerned. Little concerned.
I mean, we could still try that next time on Into the Abyss.
So tonight, we usually start off with things that we're looking on the horror horizon. You know, new things that we haven't seen yet that we're looking out for. You know, like for example, last time we talked a little bit about the Fall of the House of Usher by Mike Flanagan, which I'll pretty much watch anything that Mike Flanagan does. Although the only thing of his that I haven't watched yet is he did a Ouija board movie. Yep. He did one of the Ouija board movies, which I haven't brought myself to watch to yet, but I'm like, it's Michael Flanagan. So, so I don't know if you guys had anything that you guys.
How about our guests? Let's see.
Have you guys seen anything that you're looking forward to on the horror horizon, like movies, TV shows, anything like that? Either one of you guys. Have you guys got things that you've seen that you're looking forward to seeing?
Maybe. So I like this. or maybe I'm looking out for to see if I'm going to like this sort of trend that seems to be developing. Maybe only A24 has done it, about being really aware of a movie's potential for sequel and prequels all at the same time, as in like what they did with X and Pearl. And I guess I'm talking. So I'm sort of talking about Talk to Me, which I really enjoyed, but yet at the same time I was like, this is like bioengineered for both prequels and sequels. And then, sure enough, I think they were all built at the same time. So I'm really curious, both in terms of story, how that plays out, and in terms of industry.
That's interesting that you say that because I just finished Pearl. No, I just finished X, and I'm about halfway through Pearl, and it was very interesting how they were very much, almost made to be sequels. So, Louisa, have you seen any movies or TV shows or books that you're looking forward to as a horror fan?
I am sitting here. I've been working on my second book, been deep in that, and as you're talking, I'm like, I don't
That's okay.
Don't mess up the
I just watched Psycho again because I was writing about it, and
that's right.
Then last week when I was on Jason's Weird Reads, we talked about Rope, and I got excited. I hadn't seen that for a while, so I went back and watched Alfred Hitchcock's Rope. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that. Actually based on the Leopold and Loeb case in Chicago. 2 students who try to get away with a perfect murder.
Oh wow!
Yes. Yeah.
See, he's more than just a pretty face, folks.
I know. I got the nod of 2 men.
The Haunting of the Hall by Elizabeth.
So this is I just realized when you're saying that this is an arc of I guess this is a sequel to The Haunting on Hill House. So I'm looking forward to
really
this. Yeah.
Did she write The Historian?
I don't believe so, or I don't know. She doesn't. She writes really interstitial or science fiction,
right?
Not quite only a horror author. So, but yeah, she's a fantastic author, and this book looks really promising.
Very good. Chuck, what about you? Have you seen anything as you're pounding away on that pizza over there?
Old Bay chicken wings. So I've got 2 I did not mention last time. One is A Haunting in Venice with Hercule Poirot.
Oh, we saw the preview for that. Yep.
It's got your history, it's got your mystery in there, but it actually looks like it's going into the horror direction solidly.
That's one of the few Hercule Poirot. Did I pronounce it right?
Hercule Poirot.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know how when you're a kid.
Kenneth Branagh.
Yeah, when you know how you're a kid, you read tons of books that have difficult pronunciations, and you never hear anyone else. Yeah, so in your head, you're like, that's how it's supposed to sound like. But then when someone pronounces it for the very first time correctly, you're like, what? That's the way I am with Hercule Poirot. I read all those books in high school, and I thought it was Hercule Poirot.
French is a made-up language anyway. So
he's a Belgian.
So yes, right. He's a Belgian. How did you not know he was a Belgian?
Right, Belgian.
Little gray cells. Little gray
cells.
cells.
Trish and I are actually going to go see that because it's from Kenneth Branagh.
This is how it rolls around here, by the way. Very free flowing.
Oh yeah. It comes after Murder on the Orient Express, Death on the Nile.
Yep. So it's one of the few books that I haven't read.
It's obviously mystery, but I like that they are really putting some scary aspects into it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ever been to Venice, what a beautiful city! Go before it sinks. I mean, it's a perfect setting for it. Well, yeah, it's like New Orleans.
Yeah,
hit the water soon.
And the other one I'll mention is Slaughterhouse.
Slaughterhouse.
It is a horror movie where the killer animal is a sloth.
No, does it star? Wait. Does it star Nicolas Cage? Because that sounds like
but he should have been.
Nicolas Cage as the sloth. No makeup. Just
no makeup, no special effects.
Right, exactly. Just Cage method acting a sloth.
So picture a cocaine bear, but with an average sloth.
An average sloth, not a cocaine sloth, but an average sloth.
The average sloth.
If we needed any proof that we were in a very, very seriously challenged timeline, Slaughterhouse being real, and I saw the poster, I'm like, I'm floating. Where am I?
I'm rooting for it. It's probably terrible, but I'm rooting for it because it's an instant underdog.
You think it's snakes on a plane?
It has that feeling. It has that feeling.
Oh my! So do we have anything else we've been looking out for?
Well, yeah, actually, I had a few of them because I was just looking up. problem is some of these movies you gotta see others first, and I guess one is The Nun 2.
Oh yes, the second Nun movie is coming out.
Yeah.
The Nun was more enjoyable than it had any right to be.
Well, I mean, first of all, Kevin and I can understand that if you set a horror movie in a school,
having worked in the Catholic schools for 21 years
with nuns, yeah, that can be actually
they're scary,
petrifying. They're right up there with clowns. Now I saw they got Five Nights at Freddy's coming out. I was worried. I already saw Willy's Wonderland, but this one, let me give it a shot. One I really I just saw was Cobweb, starring Anthony Starr. Now, for those of you who don't know,
somebody else posted.
Yeah, Anthony Starr is one of the stars of The Boys, and he plays the evil.
He plays Homelander. He plays Homelander.
Yeah, if you ever saw The Boys, Anthony Starr can make that role terrifying.
Yeah,
just by a stare, and it looks like in this situation,
if Donald Trump was Superman, it would be Homelander.
No, this is much worse. I mean, just.
Wait,
I
and
don't know how the
Cobweb?
guy can keep his eyes wide open staring at you.
Oh, wait, are we talking about Cobweb now? Or are we talking about
either or? To be honest, because it turns out he might be a bad guy in this situation.
Okay.
Kid might be killed by his parents. I don't know, but one that I think I really hope is good. I'm nervous. The Exorcist, Believer.
Oh, we saw the preview for that. The Exorcist. Oh, Daniel's already shaking his head. Go ahead, Daniel. This is one of those free for all, jump right in type of things.
I'm with you. Like, I hope. Every time an Exorcist or anytime, quite frankly, any possession movie comes out, I'm like, I want it to be great, but I don't know. Like, it doesn't look promising. Does it look promising to you?
Well, the first movie was great. I didn't see the second one, but I hear it's absolutely.
Did you see the prequel movie?
Actually, yeah, I think I
like
saw
that.
both of them with Stellan Skarsgård.
Yes.
Oh, I don't have no shit. I've learned to love 3, and I'm not even talking anything about any of the ones that have come before. I'm just.
I mean,
just that preview looks like all the things that are boring, and I don't see any new ground that's going to scare me. Like if you just, if everyone's just going to do the crab walk or the floating, like what,
here's something I was thinking about, because more when I look at Exorcist and all that, because
Father
Merrin, the Exorcist himself, it started off with him in Iraq on a cultural dig when he saw the statue of Pazuzu. Now, I want to get deeper into the mythology. Now, is Pazuzu supposedly a fallen angel, a demon, or is it a Sumerian belief?
So, do you think the new movie is going to do any of that stuff, though?
That's the thing I wanted to.
You wanted to, but you don't know.
Wanted to.
Or is it just going to be 2 creepy little girls possessed?
Yes, that's what the trailer looks like. I hope we're pleasantly surprised by this really interesting history and lore and something different, but it just looks like twice the floating, twice the head rolling.
I agree. My concern is that it's going to have a 2023 feel, and because Exorcist is a classic, it may conflict with the style of the original.
No, that's right. I'm drinking more. Shut up.
He drove Tom's drink tonight. Oh my!
Don't worry, I'll put Coke in it. Cocaine Bear and Sloth.
All right.
Yeah. So we always run that risk, I guess, when they try to redo new. I can't think of anything else that's out there.
It's another sequel.
I know there's another Conjuring movie on the horizon, but I don't know how far that one out is. So the new Insidious movie. I haven't seen that yet. Did that just come out in the theaters, or have we only had?
It's streaming now. It's streaming.
Okay, I haven't seen that yet. I would like to watch that too. I haven't seen the new Insidious yet, so I'll have to check that out. So usually at this point we start talking about books that we're reading at this point in time, stuff that we're really, really enjoying or that we want to read. As I said last time, I noticed though David Mulligan said, because I like to Rendezvous with Rama. That was probably Arthur C. Clarke, I think, isn't it? It's one of the first more complex novels I read as a kid was Rendezvous with Rama. Like I read the whole series there. So as ebook editor, my reading has taken quite a hit, obviously, as the last year. All I'm doing is pretty much, and there's great books like Bad Moon Rising and Serpent Shadow and things like that. So my reading has been very rich, but I've only been reading Cemetery Dance submissions. But I have started reading again. I'm currently reading Darker Than Night by Owl Going Back, which Owl Going Back is pretty much, he's a veteran of the horror genre, and he's a guaranteed winner anytime that you pick up one of his books. And I'm also reading Paper Tigers by Angelica Damian Walters. If you haven't read anything, wait, Damian Angelica Walters or Angelica Damian Walters? Now I'm totally screwed
I'm trying to think. I can see the cover.
I think
now.
it's Angelica Damien Walters. So so Paper Tigers is excellent. If you haven't read anything by hers, I highly recommend it. And I'm rereading the Dream Quest to Unknown Kadaf, which is like if Lovecraft were to write something like try to write something on the level of Lord of the Rings, that type of language. And it's really the first time I read Dreamcast Unknown Kadaf, I think I didn't make it halfway through, but this time I'm really, really enjoying it. Tom Erb has joined us. A little bit in some more New York there. Tom Erb, welcome for joining this evening. What do you guys, our guests actually, are you guys reading anything right now you're really enjoying? Or we know Louisa's probably reading her book that she's writing, but are you guys got any books you've been reading you've really been enjoying lately?
Actually, I did start as like for me time. I got Disappearance at Devil's Rock by Paul Tremblay, which is it's awesome. No surprise there.
Is that based on the Hanging Rock in Australia? Sorry,
I don't know. I mean, I wonder that.
I don't think so.
I wonder that from the title. I don't know if anybody here read Cabin at the End of the World.
I haven't. I'm debating whether or not I want to watch the movie first or read it. But everyone keeps saying read the book first.
Read the book first.
Yeah.
The book is incredible. I saw the movie. It's sort of like enjoyable, but it's like any ambivalence that was in the book, that was so intriguing to me, is just not there.
And that's what he does so well, is that, and like in the in Head Full of Ghosts, the ending of that is so just, we're gonna leave this up to you, and that's what I loved about that novel. I generally love that when they leave something for you to think about, decide, imagine, whatever. The movie leaves nothing up to the imagination.
Okay.
So David Mulligan is reading The Black Locomotive by Rian Hughes. Nice.
Not sure if any of you all read, she's usually not thought of as horror, but I've just read the latest by Kelly Link, which I might get my colors wrong. It might be White Cat, Black Dog, or vice versa. It's a collection of short stories, and one of the stories in that book, called Skinder's Veil, has quickly leapt real close to the top of my favorite ghost stories or favorite strange, ambiguous tales ever. Skinder's Veil by Kelly Link. And if you like audio, if you like listening to things, Patton Oswalt, yes, that Patton Oswalt does the audio narration, and it is like so good. So good. And the story is like
interesting.
Unbelievable. It's like M.R. James for the modern day, but better.
Ooh, that's a good pitch. That's a solid pitch there.
Patton Oswalt's a huge geek, man. He's awesome.
Yeah, he's amazing.
He does the audiobooks. So
yeah.
I never saw him. Okay.
What about you, Chuck, book-wise?
I am reading something that's been on my to-read shelf for a couple of years now, and that's Metro 2033. So, yeah, Kevin Stevie went to sleep. I'm enjoying
on the Roku remote. Okay.
I'm enjoying that immensely. It's been one that I've been, like I said, meaning to get to, but it's a fantastic apocalyptic sci-fi horror story. So I'm only through the first few chapters, the longer chapters. It's a series of individual stories kind of adding up, but so far it's fantastic.
Tom?
Well, I have got quite a backlog, especially this one writer named Lucia. I mean,
why are you reading him? He's a hack.
I don't know.
Read anything by him.
Anyways, actually,
he just writes for money. Anything he'll write.
It's okay. We're all into that money. But actually, my father and I just came back from visiting my sister and her family up in Cape Cod. I was for 4 days, and I went to a bookstore. And I'm more into the thrillers, the mysteries, even getting into the cozy murder mystery.
You're a cozy kind of guy.
I am, and I even told Kevin I was looking at doing my own little murder mystery set in school. His name's got to be Henry Allison, and well, it doesn't matter. So I got a few more of those because Cape Cod, I think, is like a perfect spot to have not just mystery and thriller, but I think horror too, because it's basically a peninsula, and it just feels like you could be trapped on that peninsula.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm just well into my cups right now.
Yeah, the Kraken has been released.
The Kraken
has been released at this point.
And update on the pink concoction. It tastes like pink alcohol. I guess
pink alcohol. If pink had a flavor, then they would take pink.
Chuck is comfortable with himself.
Instead of tasting like I mixed cream savers with rum, it tastes more like the old. What's the name of the old the pink medicine they give you when you're a kid?
Pepto-Bismol.
No, not Pepto-Bismol. No, the one that's actual medicine. Sorry, no.
Pepto-Bismol
with a prescription. No, with an infection, like the antibacterial one.
I don't remember that. I don't
know.
I guess Gen X didn't have that one.
So
I do remember the little pink. If we're talking about Werther's Originals,
Calamine lotion.
What's that?
Calamine lotion.
I haven't tasted calamine
That's
lotion,
what I
but this
thought.
is probably
Calamine
what it
lotion.
tastes like.
You see those little. My grandmother didn't give out Werther's Originals, but she gave out these little pink candies.
Yeah.
So that's
as bad as the ribbon candy.
No, you back off of ribbon candy. That's awesome. Ribbon candy is great.
We got one more year before the half a century.
You know, AARP is coming up pretty soon here. Okay. All right. So seeing as how we're on a borrowed laptop, and I want to make sure we get into Winterset. Oh, you're gonna like this one, Chuck. Winterset Hollow is the best horror novel I read. Oh, the last horror novel. Oh, I thought you said the best horror novel, David, because Tom had. You're reading. Tom Erb is reading Gabino's "The Devil Takes You Home" and John Mayberry's "Long Past Midnight." Devil Takes You Home is one that I want to read myself. I was there when we were at StokerCon. When he won it. Yeah, that was pretty nice. With him and Cynthia Palelo won at StokerCon this year. That was pretty awesome. So why don't we start by allowing Luisa, because I'm going to adjust our timetable here to make sure we get everything fit in, because we're not on my laptop, we're on Chuck's laptop,
and it's got a battery that's draining.
Nah, it'll be fine, but I want to make sure I get our guests in. So Luisa Colon, we published her debut novel this year, Bad Moon Rising, and it's wonderful work. One of the reviewers on NetGalley posted, I think they said something along the lines of, "I thought I was dreaming as I read this," and they gave it like a 5-star review. And that's a really great way of describing. It's just got this really wonderful, surreal, dreamlike nature. I also think, my personal opinion, of course, I'm the editor, so I'm a little prejudiced. I also think there's been a wildly a little biased, not prejudiced,
a little harsh.
I'm a little prejudiced. I'm a little biased. But there's been a plot point there that I think has been totally misunderstood by so many reviewers. But oh well. So Luisa, why don't you let us know a little bit about the novel, its background, anything you want to tell us about it. Daniel's going to go take a break, which is good. So go ahead, Luisa.
Fine.
You have the floor.
Okay. So yeah, I've been looking. I don't know if I'm supposed to look at the reviews. I noticed a lot of
everyone tells you no, but as a writer, I can tell you just go ahead and look at it.
I'm so curious. A lot of people have a problem with the thing that's mentioned in the very first sentence, which I don't think is really like a spoiler, because it is the very first sentence.
And which is curious to me, because I'm like, are you a horror fan? It's very clearly on the NetGalley listing horror, but I don't know.
Right. So, Is that the plot point you're talking about?
No, the other plot point, the one that's
the other plot point. So basically, I'm Puerto Rican, and my dad, he had 2 aunts in Puerto Rico who were he called them friendly witches. So I was kind of inspired to write the book by his stories about them, they kind of seamlessly integrated their witchcraft into everyday life. It was not a big thing. And then about 10 years ago, I posted something on a listserv. I was asking about, I needed help with my neighbors being obnoxious. And a Latina woman wrote to me. She said, "Oh, put a broom on your door, hang it upside down, put a hat on it, and say, go away." That was her advice. And she had the same type of friendly witchcraft in her family that we did. And I just felt like when I read that, I felt like I have to write a story with this in it. And then it kind of went from there.
Oh, cool.
Right. Who's thinking about doing that at home?
What's that?
I I don't know if I want to even touch on this. If I go home, I have a hat, I have a broom.
Oh,
I
God's thinking of doing something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do it. You feel
yeah,
about your neighbors.
Go ahead. Sorry. Continue.
Oh no, I just said, how do you feel about your neighbors? Want them to
Thank
fly
God.
away?
Oh, that's right. You did not like them at all. I
They
remember
moved.
that.
That's
I
it.
remember that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and it's a wonderful debut. Very very poetic language. You know, and I think it's done pretty well for us. And is there anything else you want to share about writing it, or maybe a little bit about the plot, or for those who will tune in later?
Sure. I mean, it's been interesting to me to see people getting freaked out about it, the plot. I mean, again, like you said, it's horror. So I kind of think it's funny when people say it made me really uncomfortable.
That
Like,
means more sales.
It's supposed to do that.
Yeah.
I guess I've done my job.
I haven't read it yet because again, this author named Lucia keeps giving me his books. I will get around to reading it, but I was reading bits and pieces of it. It looked like an upstate versus downstate situation. At least that's how they were describing it on the website. Now, for those of you who don't know of New York,
What website?
I don't know. I just grabbed the website.
Is grab website. Okay.
He was on upstate versus downstate.com. So
I was gonna say.
Well, I mean, okay, see, I lived in New York, and of course, I lived up here. We all know there's a big difference. By the way, Westchester doesn't count as upstate. Okay, we're in God's country. Up here. So, were you thinking about that too? Because I know there's a big divide.
I mean, I've had some really good times in New Paltz, No Pulse, as we used to call it. I'm New York City born and raised, but I had some good times up there. You won't catch me saying anything bad about it.
No, that's what we say bad things about it all the time. I live in meth country.
This is true. You do.
yeah, it's meth country.
But yeah, so especially Gabriel, a lot of people were taking issue with Gabriel and his character and things like that, and I didn't see the same. I think they were, I don't know, like you said, it's supposed to horror is supposed to have that element of frisson there that's supposed to make you uncomfortable and be like, oh, I'm not sure about this, and
Right.
So,
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is based not literally, but is based in sort of an abstract way on personal experience. So when people review, when they review it and say like, she shouldn't go there, or that's a big no, my feeling is kind of like, well, I'm writing what I know and what I feel. So
right.
I think I could go there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, horror is supposed to be the genre of warts and all. Like you show what's actually there. You don't gloss over it. You choose at what level you go in there, but you have to expect some discomfort. So I agree. It's people who read the genre should expect some discomfort.
Yeah,
and I would like more urban-based horror because most of the time it's rural or it's suburban.
The small town horror. Who was it that wrote a really good? I think it was Lisa Morton wrote a really good essay about that a couple years ago, and I think it was on Nightmare Magazine, and people took that as a slam against small town horror, but she doesn't live in a small town. She lives in the city. She lives in LA, and she's like, listen, I read small town horror and it does nothing for me because I'm not from a small town. I can't connect to these things. But then, and then Brian Keene, as he often does, weighed in because he is the genre's Batman. And he said, look, I said, it's where you're from, where you've grown up. If you grew up in a small town, then you're very familiar with those shadows. And you know how they can be scary, but if someone who grew up in the city, they have a whole bunch of different trigger points.
Oh, absolutely.
So, you worked in the city. You didn't grow up in the city, but you lived in the city.
Yeah, I lived and worked there. Not to mention, we have 5 different boroughs that are extremely different from each other. There's just so many possibilities, and they could work.
Yeah, I was on the rural horror panel at StokerCon.
You were, that's
which was
right.
A great time.
They probably brought up a lot of the same things, right?
Yep. And one of the things that I mentioned was I felt like most horror stories are kind of suburb coded, or coded, not coded as in like a coding on it, but coded as in the language of default is suburban. Where if it goes urban, it's extra suburban. It goes a little bit more, but usually with horror, it tends to go someplace less populated than the suburbs. So it goes to either small town or rural,
or isolated.
Or isolated. And it's a thing where I think for a lot of people, the defaults comfort zone is suburbs. And so you go to a place that's a little bit more wild, a little bit less tamed than the suburbs, and that feels a bit unnerving. I think that's why a lot of horror is that way. But I talked about that relationship, but I agree with you. I'd like to see a lot more urban horror because, again, it goes out of the suburbs in a different direction, and there's room for stories there, but it's going to be a different kind of story.
So, Daniel, I was going to chime in, but I don't know if you wanted to chime in before I started running my mouth, because when I run my mouth, it doesn't stop. So, did you have anything you wanted to?
Wait.
Tom's going to take another drink first.
No,
Are you sleeping on my futon tonight?
I might be passed out.
So, Dan, do you have anything you want to chime in here about this? We've kind of evolved into country horror and city horror now.
I was gonna say just if I didn't realize that people were telling that there was actually commentary out there that Luisa should no, you shouldn't go there. I just was thinking of the late great Jack Ketchum. His adage is just don't look away. Horror. His adage is just like don't look away. And I think if you're getting, like, obviously no one wants to get quote unquote negative feedback, but I think if you're getting that kind of feedback, I think you've done your job right. I mean, it's to have people feel anything. Like, I love this character, I hate this character, I relate to this character, I'm scared of this character. You must go there. You shouldn't go there. I think, like, if you're invoking strong response, it's a testament to your writing. And I haven't finished the book yet. I just heard like Tom, bits and pieces, but I think that's kind of good or promising feedback to get.
I think when people get angry at you, it probably means that you're doing something right.
Yeah. And even reactions that it becomes out of the hands of you. Like, sometimes you get a reaction and it's strong. You're like, that's not what I meant at all. And I didn't want that, but we'll take it.
I'm just going to order Louisa's book for a signed copy too.
What's that?
I won't be like Kevin, who charges extra.
I don't charge extra for signed copies. This is a long story. We'll talk about this later.
No, you charge extra for signing his chest. That's what you do.
This was 15 years ago, I think.
I probably could hook you up. There's somebody in this room that probably could get you a signed copy from Louisa if you want one.
So,
I
I will say, Kevin, you sold me on the description of it being very dreamlike. Although I'm a bit burned because the last time I was promised horror that was dreamlike was Skinamarink.
Let's not go there.
But Luisa, I'm kind of curious. So what are you working on now? What's the next book you're working on, and what are the similarities in style do you expect?
Oh, well, the book I'm working on right now, which I haven't titled yet, I'm kind of waiting for that moment, is actually set in the similar universe to Batman Rising, although it's not a sequel. There's some follow-up and some similar characters. It's set in a different time. It's set in New York City in the 70s when there was this like extreme rise in police corruption. I think there have been books and documentaries and all that stuff. Pretty nightmarish, and that's not the focus of the story, but it's definitely in there.
That sounds interesting because Kevin and I and Chuck, we were talking about. You guys said it was extreme horror, but to me,
we're going to talk about that in a minute.
I actually consider it real horror, the actual real things that can happen. In the end, real horror is just the evil that people do. And when you just said the police corruption, the first thought I just had was, Chuck, when you and I went to see the Candyman movie that came out, and it was really, I hope no jerk says, oh, it's all socially conscious wokeness. I prefer to be awake during movies in the first place. But I really liked it because here's something that no one really talks about. And God bless that director. She just went full force and, but still made a good horror movie.
And the 70s and 80s New York City is a very interesting era where there was a big push to, I guess, clean up crime, but also make it more family friendly. And I think some people would argue that there was some gains out of that, but there was definitely a lot of ugly, heavy push from the police in that. And so there was also a lot of police corruption, like you said. And that's something where it's a different kind of darkness that's there. And it's actually kind of more intimidating because it's the side that has the law, and it's
I was living there late 90s, early 2000s, and the Justin Volpe case, the Abby Louima case, the Amadou Diallo case, that made it front and center, especially because computers became such a big deal. And I think that's what I say is real horror instead of extreme horror, real horror, because they can be one and the same. What humans can do is the scariest thing in the world, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
All right, so
I think I'm playing with that idea too. Is like in real life, if someone goes this far in a horror novel, they're gonna go that far. Like, why not? Right?
Yep. But no, well done on disturbing some NetGalley readers. I think that should be a goal. If you've got a lot of people reading in that, or not necessarily, regular horror readers, I think it should hit some buttons that make them uncomfortable. So
yeah, I hope so. Thanks.
Can't wait to read them. So
what's that? I'm gonna slide over. So
I'm taking a repass because I didn't get a chance to eat yet.
Yeah, Kevin's going for the pizza. I've got
Do you want to start the extreme horror discussion now? That seems like
or do you want to, or no?
Let Daniel go. Yes, let Daniel go.
Yeah. So we'll talk to Daniel because again, we wanted to finish before. Let's see, my battery is at 29%. But we want to talk to Daniel about his book as well, and give him a chance to tell us what it's about and what really inspired you to write it.
Oh well, I guess here's an advanced copy of it, The Serpent's Shadow.
Yeah, just pass that through.
You're grabbing the screen.
It's a hard book to tell you what it's about because I like stories. I like to watch them and read them. I also like to write them of stories that they're kind of slippery. You think they're sort of one thing, and you think you're getting the straight up tropes, but really, if you peel it back a little bit, it's about another. So on the surface, this might look like a real standard horror book. There's a killer. There's a knife killer on the loose. There's teens on vacation. It takes place in Cancun in the 1980s. So it looks like this is going to be like, oh, okay, there's nothing new here, or this is tried and true turf. There's the tension of kids wanting to have fun, kids being kids getting into trouble, versus like killer is bad killer. But I think just crossing the line a little bit into the book, that's dispensed of pretty quickly. The kids are wandering into much larger, perhaps more real world horror of what in this real world has become of or was struggling to become the Yucatan Peninsula in both the people and the ecosystem, and also both as in the supernatural or cosmic horror, as in there are forces that are, for example, there is a character in the book, there's a creature so large that it can just knock the moon out of orbit just by touching it with its tail. It's that large. So what is the book about? I call it earthbound cosmic horror. It's set. It's it's a romance story between a young kid who just wants to have fun, just wants to get the girl, but they're just swept in between this war that has both earthly and cosmic forces, and possibly a really big monster.
And I'll say that the earthquake on the camera is brought to you by Kevin's cat, who's against the tray table.
Hooray.
But I will say, looking at the reviews, I started reading your story. The reviews talked about how the comments at the beginning talked about how it brings you in a direction that's not expected. I saw also that you mentioned in your introduction that it went darker than you usually do. You usually you mentioned quiet horror, but in this one you went to, I guess, gloves off is a good way to put it. What was your experience with that?
Yeah, I don't. I guess my influences, you can tell they're influencing you. I'm not really, at least at that time when I was writing this, I wasn't really conscious of what it's going to be. My short story collection from Cemetery Dance, The Night Marchers and Other Strange Tales, is quiet horror. I mean, there are definitely horrors in this and strange things happening, but it's not body horror. It's not gore. It's not mostly not depictions of violence. But and I think in many ways, The Serpent Shadow is a similar story. In that way, it might feel like a quiet horror, it might feel like a slow burn, but there are points in the story where I don't cut away or I don't look away. So for me, it felt like a departure in terms of having that be on the page and not cut away. To the seasoned horror reader, it might just be par for the course or something that's expected. But I was working with editor Norman Prentice on that, and it was great. I'm coming from a bit of an outsider from the horror world, so it's great. Cemetery Dance and all you guys and the whole team there has been my my education into learning about horror and the huge umbrella, on the one hand of like Saw or Extreme, or on the other hand, really nuanced and dreamlike stuff like Luisa's book and everything in between. So so the Serpent Shadow might have a mix of it. And you mentioned that violence, and right around the time of the book had already been written, but around the time when when the book had been acquired, a later in influence life to me was, I haven't read much of his work, but Jack Ketchum, like I said, about his theory about not looking away is something I take to heart, even if that does not mean physical violence. I think both the physical and all sorts of depictions.
Yep. Yeah. And I will say that flash you saw was Kevin taking a picture of Tom holding his cat. He owes you a picture. He owes an adorable picture of Tom and the cat.
Kevin feels cheated.
Yes. We'll switch places.
I was actually just sending it to my wife because we have a new cat that we have just rehomed, and she has spent the last, obviously as cats do when you rehome them, she spent the last week just basically hiding down here in the horror cave. But now she's decided that there are people, and these people will pet me.
Yep.
So now she's coming out and socializing.
But I will say, Daniel, I've not gotten far enough to comment on the story. But I will say your descriptions are fantastic, and I love the real personas of the characters. They talk, they dialogue, and I talked to Rob O'Tone, who's another horror author, and he said, I said I loved his characters. They feel odd, but they feel very real, and he appreciated that because the characters were based on him and his wife. And he's had some people that who felt they didn't feel real, but it does. Knowing Rob and knowing him, that is him. Like, that character is Rob, and all of his quirks, and he's a great guy. And I read your characters, and you have a very opinionated college student, and that's I know that person. We all know many of those people from their college years, and it's not a perfect hero, but you see a very real person, and I think you did a good job of depicting real people.
Thank you.
I actually noticed because this is the book with the Lady of Guadalupe on it, the Holy Mary.
On the cover,
Yep.
yes.
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 Of course. That was quite an interesting choice.
I believe in the book it draws upon the character Santa Muerte or Saint Death in Mexican lore. There's a lot of different, stands for a lot of different things, and I took my liberties with that lore and mythology. So without going into the reality or how because I'm an outsider, at least in the book, the Yucatan Peninsula is a rebellious place, still is, but even before Cancun came in the 70s, it was like, Mexico has a government and Yucatan is like, fuck you, and it's like what is it going to be? Is this going to be is this place going to be developed? Is it going to be to go the way of development? Is it going to go the way of nature? Is it going to go the way of outsiders? Is it going to go the way of indigenous people? And at least in the book, Saint Death is being held upon as like a Robin Hood or folk hero of the people. And there is one of the things, like when you visit, I guess someone on a podcast I was on they said, yeah, your book is like The White Lotus meets James Tiptree. And I was like, wow, I really like that thing, because there is an element of a lot of us, we go to Hawaii or go to Cancun, and it's this sort of tropical wonderland. And if you just peel back the surface, there's just such immense conflict and immense depth and immense supernatural going on there. The way that the White Lady, that's the English Anglicization of Saint Death, people are saying, wow, there's a killer on the loose who is butchering and killing tourists in Cancun. And it's like, hey, we're kids, we just want to go out, but it's like, instead of like, don't drink too much, it's like, be home on curfew, don't drink too much, and don't get killed by the serial killer out there. So that, so it's like in the Serpent Shadow, it's like, is this just a killer? Or is this Saint Death come to life? Is this Saint Death taken form? And that's just one of the questions that may or may not be in play in the story. And I like the ambiguities. I like ambiguities. I like being not on a steady foot. I also like it when a story can be like two people can come to opposite conclusions and both of them are supported. I think I like stories that interact with the reader more. So I think you may find that in the Serpent Shadow.
Nice.
I was just thinking, because sometimes you have to wonder if people think of stuff that authors or directors don't even think of. 1980s Central America.
Then I'll grab that.
I mean, I can say that as a Santa Muerta right there, with the drug cartels, with the communist revolutions, the involvement of the U.S. I mean, I think some people might read a lot into this because, again, real world versus the horror.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of horror in the real world, and just stepping off American shores, there are so many things going on. This doesn't really go the direction of the cartels and the sort of horrors that are rich for the using there, but it does shine the light on something that is real, which is the history of this one region. And just as an outsider, and I'm also showing my age here. When I went to some of these. I visited some of those places in the early 1980s as a kid or as a teenager, and at least as an outsider, you step just off the resort grounds, and there are wonders and beauties like you've never seen before. Like if I hadn't seen it myself, I wouldn't believe that it is real.
Oh, I would love to see the Mayan pyramids.
And when I went back the next year, I saw the bulldozers. I saw the clear cut. I saw the smoke. I touched it. So on the one hand, there's that horror to me. But now there's like an even another level to that. I also saw poverty and hardship that like you had never seen before. So on the one hand, at first I was like, well, all this development is bad. It's bad. It's bad. It's bad. And in my heart, and there's one place where, yeah, it is. But when I went back decades later as an adult to some of these places, and the poverty was gone. And places that were in peril, people were at least, I don't know if they're flourishing, but they're at least, living with dignity and respect and control. So it's like, well, yeah, there's always a different non-intuitive side to things that you think are bad. And I think it's good when a book can put the pieces into play for you, and you can see it like a Rorschach blot, what you want to see it, like there could be you could be echo-minded and be like, this is awful, like this place there's just hotels there now and it's ruined, and there's just loss. And yeah, I could breathe with you on that. I felt that firsthand. But then on the other hand, I could also say, well, what's the price of of a child growing up and not dying or what's the price of dignity, or what's the price of that? So yeah, it's the Yucatan is a place of great wonder and complexity and conflict that continues to this day. And I hope I touched, at least from an outsider, from an anglicized eyes in perspective, on that, in addition to sort of using like that horror framework, it's like kids in peril, killer on the loose.
And I'll read these here. I'm catching up on the comments that are here. This goes back to Luisa's story, but David Mulligan mentioned he loves New York City horror, The Hunger, The Wolf and Live Girls, and he mentions Ray Garton's.
Oh, Ray Garton's Live Girls.
Introduction to Live Girls in the 42nd Street porn shops, and remembering it exactly like that description.
I don't know about those. racist.
But I maybe I have a question, or if you want to go first.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So I have a question. This goes to Daniel and Luisa. What are maybe some genres or some authors that have influenced you heavily, either in these stories or just in general with your approach to horror?
Luisa, you want to hit that?
Sure. I mean, weirdly enough, I would say I would look to some horror filmmakers who've really influenced me. David Cronenberg is one.
Mm-hmm.
Really good example of that for me is his movie The Brood. I'm a huge fan, and he's often called it his version of Kramer versus Kramer. And I actually think it's way more realistic than Kramer versus Kramer when it comes to the story of like people divorcing.
Mm-hmm.
And similarly, like my story is about adolescence and growing up and having your parents be divorced and, trauma, broken families. And to me, it's a very realistic take on that. And that for me comes from the kind of horror filmmaking, that interpretation of things that comes across realistically on an emotional level, even if it's completely not realistic or just like pure horror.
Mm-hmm.
For me, there's no way I can get through an interview without saying the author Robert Aikman. I was writing.
You and I are the few, sir.
What was that? Was that a
you and I are the few people who even know his name, and that's a shame.
Well, yeah. Well, we're gonna have to talk Aikman at some time when we're not. But,
we are.
We can talk about that. But in really brief, what I can say is, for the longest time, and I'm really thankful for Cemetery Dance for bringing me into the fold. I guess it's been about 20 years since they started publishing my work in Cemetery Dance magazine, but I didn't know if I was a horror guy. I didn't know. I just knew I wanted to write a certain thing, and that thing was stories that were intentionally ambiguous. Fast forward to at some point, I was fortunate enough for the great Peter Straub turned me on to Robert Aikman. He was like, "Here, take this, read this," and it really changed my life. But to making a ton of long story short, what Robert Aikman, to really grossly oversimplify him, he is all about stories that are just intentionally ambiguous, that the reader really has to bring themselves into it, and the supernatural is not defined. And hey, I love all kinds of horror, but the opposite of Robert Aikman is like Dracula. There are rules. Dracula is a vampire. You kill him by cutting off his head or putting him in sunlight. So the stories come about, and they're fantastic stories, but the stories are about slaying the monster, about the rules. Robert Aikman, or people like him, you don't know what's going on. So the stories, I feel like it's a natural way for the stories to become about people and about humans and a humanistic thing. So that'll be my answer as to what influences me, or I aspire to.
Nice. You had a question you were going to ask.
Oh, I think it's lost in the mists now. Yeah, I was actually going back to New York horror, but now it feels like it's out of sync because we were talking about movies in New York horror. You guys were, because David Mulligan was saying I like New York horror, The Hunger, The Wolfen, Live Girls. But I what occurred to me was in New York, because this goes back to we were talking about the urban setting versus the country setting. There's a really, first of all, it's a trauma film, but it's not. It's very much not a trauma film though. There's a movie called Death by Temptation. And it has
very trauma.
It has Samuel L. Jackson is in it for exactly 5 minutes as like a ranting preacher. But it's about this preacher's son who goes to New York City, and a succubus whose desire is to ruin him because he's a preacher's son.
Yeah.
But it's way better than it has any right to be, and it's not your standard. It's not like Black Roses. I don't know if I've ever seen Black Roses. That's another trauma film about the satanic panic and what if a rock band really was a bunch of demons. But but no, it was really well done in its own way because it was playing off that. I mean, it's a really cliche. The naive goes to the city, and the city's this big corrupting influence, and will the naive be able to retain this purity in the face of the city? But it was very much a non-trauma film. which is very because like you're expecting the gag, and there's plenty of gags throughout because it's trauma film. You're expecting the gag, but then suddenly you're like, no, I'm kind of into this. I'm invested in this movie. It should be streaming free, deaf, not death, because it was the '90s, so everything was like, yo, deaf. It was Death by Temptation. But it's a movie that has much better than it has any right being.
There's one New York City horror movie we saw more recently. I think, Kevin, you and I saw it. Deliver Us from Evil with Eric Bana.
Oh, we saw that a little while ago. Deliver Us from Evil with Eric Bana. Yeah.
And I love the fact that it was in the Bronx instead of say Manhattan. But
that's supposedly based on a true story.
Yeah, and I thought it worked very well. You got two sets of horror, real life and the ethereal life.
Yeah. Yep.
So I have a question. I have a question for the panel, for if possible, on the topic of urban or versus maybe not be rural, but small town. I know in preparation for the show, you were going to ask about classic horror films, and there are two films I was wondering if they were even horror at all. But I was thinking about them in terms of one depicts New York City and one depicts a small town. And those two movies were Q, Quetzalcoatl, the Winged Serpent, as the urban, and as the rural, or at least small town, The Blob. Wow. And The Blob is maybe one of my favorite movies ever. But I don't know, urban, rural, horror, not horror, discuss.
Well, Quetzalcoatl or Q, I did see, and they actually had Michael Moriarty. One of the had. See, one thing about movies is it really depends on the acting talent, too. And for those of you who don't know, younger people, Quetzalcoatl, a Mexican demigod, winged serpent that's eating people in New York City off the high-rises.
Oh, now I need to watch this movie.
Well, yeah, because in the end...
It basically is a B movie of The Serpent's Shadow with Michael Moriarty set in New York.
Yeah, the finale was at the Chrysler Building.
Yeah.
So, because, of course, the biggest argument is how could a bird or an animal like that not be seen flying into New York City? But I liked it because, in the end, New York is a city of high-rises. A lot of people spend their lives well above ground level. I thought that actually kind of
worked. Those stupid-looking skinny towers they have now.
And it raises the cosmic horror aspect of it. Of like, yeah, well, how was it not seen? Like, well, did it come from this dimension? At least for me, I'm like, that thing ain't from this planet, man. Like that I'm thinking it's extra dimensional. And those eggs, when they hatch, like, I don't know. But maybe I'm reading into the story.
Well, you also mentioned the Blob. Now,
I love the Blob.
Which one though? Because you got the Steve.
I've seen them both.
All right, Steve McQueen or Kevin Dillon.
I'm talking Steve McQueen. They both have their things. But in terms of a snapshot in time, a snapshot in history, and the themes of cosmic horror, in terms of something that it doesn't, you can't reason with it. It's not good or evil. It's not malicious, but it will just kill you without even being thinking about you. The first one, I'm thinking.
All right. I mean, yeah, actually, no, it was pretty good. I couldn't buy Steve McQueen as a high schooler, though.
Of course. But it's like a play. He's 30, 40 years old. Like,
yeah.
And actually, it was good. And I mean, I think especially in the first one was actually about a small town coming together decently to fight this.
Yeah.
The second one,
Horror DNA Steve is here. Sorry, I had to Horror DNA Steve. You remember Steve? You met him down at Scares of Care.
I don't know. I was probably drunk. So. Kevin Dillon one in the 1980s. The outsider was the hero, but regular society. Late 80s saw a lot of anti-government, anti-authoritarian movies coming out. Because that one was actually, the first movie was just based on it's an alien organism. The second one, it was a government experiment that went wrong. That actually happened a lot in the late 80s.
Yeah, so both very effective, but both very different, I think,
place to that. It's like
kind of films.
Yeah.
And we find the good movies where we can.
You might hit the rest of the day.
And Steve Petty is
Horror DNA Steve. You guys know what Horror DNA is? That's Steve. He's with us tonight.
Q was written by the amazing Larry Cohen. you have the Jeffrey Oliver mentioned the Unhealer, and then of course this one I forgot about this one, but Chud. For New York City horror, you got Chud.
Yes, you can't. You gotta have Chud.
That's a classic.
That's right up there with actually Alligator too.
Yeah.
Which was before the alligators in New York City sewers.
So this would be a good conversation to have, and the reason I want to push this afterwards, after the discussion with Daniel with his little introduction there, which is the extreme horror. I mean, I would not describe it as extreme horror,
okay.
But he mentioned that he was writing something darker. Gator was Chicago.
Yep.
Steve mentions. But there's been a little bit of a hoopla. I guess.
Wait. There's hoopla in the horror genre.
Yeah.
You must be mistaken. There is never drama in the horror community ever.
Well, and I will say this was not coming from the horror community. This is coming from the TikTok community into the horror community. I will say that's a great pairing. And this also leads into what Luisa was mentioning, where people felt uncomfortable with what they read, and commented on that in their reviews. And that is the subject of extreme horror, which, you know, we're not writing in the extreme horror genre. And Luisa and Daniel are not either.
We probably should define it first. So, like, Tom, really quickly, if I say extreme horror, what do you think that means?
Oh, I just go back to when we were discussing Bob Ford's novel, which was
Burner.
Burner.
The
cruelest things that humans can do to each other.
Okay.
And if I was thinking about movies along that lines, it would be Saw, it would be Hostel.
Okay.
And others along that veins. But you ever stop thinking extreme horror in the end is just evil men, period?
So, Chuck, we say extreme horror. What do you think?
Oh, it's
Horror DNA says Burner is an ass kicker.
Yeah,
yes, it is. You have not read Burner, you need to go read it. So, extreme horror, Chuck. What do you think extreme horror
I'm going
is?
blank. I'm terrible with names, but Daniel actually mentioned the name. I'm sorry, the name.
Jack Ketchum?
Sorry?
Jack Ketchum?
Yeah, Jack Ketchum. Jack Ketchum, I think, is often a name brought up with the extreme horror genre. And like you said, it was that Don't Look Away. I think with extreme horror, it's
Ed Lee, absolutely,
Ed Lee, yep.
Yeah.
I think it's a genre where, I mean, horror goes to uncomfortable places, but I think extreme horror kind of clamps the eyes open and doesn't look away from the details. It spends paragraphs on what most horror authors would spend a couple sentences on, where it goes
where horror normal would not go at all.
So I think there's a misconception with non-horror readers that horror authors don't gloss over some uncomfortable things, but I think everyone chooses that comfort level of where they want to go and that reading experience they want to give, and extreme horror authors go the extra mile on those details.
So, Luisa and Daniel, do you have any thoughts on what extreme horror is, or what the term means to you, or do you pretty much have the same thoughts that we did, or?
Yeah, I mean, I would. The things that came to mind, you know, Jack Ketchum, definitely with movies, Saw, Hostel. Although in terms of Evil Men, I would say Audition. Don't forget Audition, because I would consider that extreme horror, and it's
weird way to talk about it, but okay.
What about you, Daniel?
Yeah, I think I'm learning. Yeah, you know, like I don't really have anything to add other than like, yeah, I'm curious as to what would define it, but all those things seem right to me.
It's a tricky thing, because once you start delving into labels, quiet horror, extreme horror,
splatterpunk,
for example, see, I don't know if I'm not sure if I would consider when you think of people who, but that's nothing too. When Jack Ketchum was writing, he did not say, "Oh, I'm writing extreme horror."
Yep.
When John Skip and Craig Spector were writing, they were not saying, "Oh, we're writing splatterpunk." Okay. Even Charles Grant used to call this stuff dark fantasy, not really quiet horror. You know, so these terms, that's also something we need to keep in mind. These terms, I think I tell my kids because I also, the day job, of course, is teaching English. And I always tell the kids, you know, these genre labels are things that are marketing things, or we look back and study literature. And, you know, when Moby Dick was when Herman Melville was writing Moby Dick, he wasn't thinking, I'm writing a novel that's trafficking in existentialism, and that's something that critics look back and be like, oh,
I actually read the original. They don't deal with the damn whale until like 7, 8.
No, Moby Dick is a wonderful novel as long as you're okay with reading 400 pages before the whale actually shows up. And I'm not kidding. I do love that novel. It's just that's a commitment. So there's nothing to keep it. And that's the thing too that I sometimes. So if you want to hear my position,
well, we should probably frame it. So recently, the people may not know what the discussion is. Recently, there's been a couple months ago.
There's a dust up
with
because the horror genre never has a drama ever.
The horror genre is debating what is splatterpunk versus extreme horror, and some voices have weighed in. But this is not the one we're referring to. We're not going to get into that debate. What's coming on with the TikTok reviewers is this common misconception of extreme horror writers being as awful as of people as what they write.
Well, and not only that, so I'm going to go out and say that I'm suspicious of anybody. Like, for example, Jack Ketchum, when he wrote The Girl Next Door, or he wrote some of the other, he wrote the book Cover, which is a great novel, and he wrote some of the other novels. He wasn't telling himself, oh, I'm going to sit down and write an extreme horror novel now. He just wrote. He wrote what was inside him. He says, I'm not going to look away. There's another novel called Prodigal Blues by Gary Braunbeck, which deals with child kidnapping and sexual abuse. And it is so hard to read, and yet you can't stop reading it. But it wasn't like Gary.
Would that be considered horror?
Oh, see, that's another thing too. We could probably debate that all day long. Just trust me.
Be considered a thriller.
Trust me, the amount of graphic detail that Gary went into in Prodigal Blues, it was horror. But Gary Braunbeck has written quiet existential horror as well. So it's not like Gary sat down and thought to himself, I'm going to write extreme horror. He sat down and wrote, that one beat the ever-living shit out of me. Yeah, Prodigal Blues does that, and I would highly recommend it to anybody if you can, if you can handle it. But he didn't, and I guess I'm going to say I don't want to be like crotchety old man here, but
he'll do it though.
I think this is coming from a guy who has said that he writes quiet horror in the past. When I see an author sit down, automatically they have to broadcast, I'm an extreme horror writer. I do a little like that. That's the issue I have with the current. The current controversy is an extreme author who will remain unnamed. Someone objected to his book,
and also objected to him as a human being, even though
so it did make the mistake.
They didn't know the author as a human being.
They did make the leap, and that is a common mistake that I think is you cannot automatically assume. Like, for example, Gary Braunbeck in Prodigal Blues is not a child abuser. He doesn't mutilate children. He doesn't kill people. He doesn't have sex with their corpses. Not that actually happens in that novel, but anyway, he doesn't do any of those things. To assume that he is that type of person because of the material, that's just like, to me, that's like rookie 101. Okay, you don't ever make that mistake. So a reviewer did decide to level accusations against the writer because of what they had chosen to write. But then the writer's response was to then write a new novel and dedicate it to the reviewer,
which I would do,
and then name a character after the reviewer.
Yeah.
And then terrible things happen to the reviewer.
I would
they
say
named it after it.
Not smart.
But then, so this obviously
you're picking up on it at that point.
But the problem that's a little troubling to me is the people who defended it.
Yep.
Because I'm just like, oh, he's an extreme horror writer. I'm like, well, look, if you've got to wear a thing around your neck that says I'm an extreme horror writer, then it starts feeling a little bit like, and again, I don't think this guy is that. I think he showed probably poor decision making and poor taste. But if you have to broadcast you're an extreme horror writer, then it starts to feel a little bit more like an affectation.
Yeah,
to me.
So I'm going to bring a question here.
So you go ahead. I'm going to stop talking.
I would agree with you. I'm also
take another drink, Tom.
I'm not a big reader of extreme horror. Again, if a pitch starts out with it's extreme, in the first sentence, I'm probably zoning out at that point because it's just not my
None of
genre.
Jack Ketchum's novels start out that way.
Yeah.
In fact, he lulls you into this it's
first,
a novel.
oh
my God.
The first word I hear with Jack Ketchum is heartbreaking usually,
Yes.
which does draw me in.
Yes.
When you come in with extreme body horror as your pitch, I'm probably zoning out.
Well, extreme, but that's the thing. I think that's the problem there too. Extreme, like for example, Prodigal Brews his body. It will beat the snot out of you, but he doesn't lean into. That's not the pitch.
That's not the pitch.
I guess it's a quibble on my part. I mean, crotchety old man.
Yep, crotchety old man. But it's one of those things where it's not my genre, but I will defend the right of people to write that genre, even if I'm not their target audience. But I think all horror writers, to an extent, run into this stigma of you are what you write, and because horror is intentionally uncomfortable, it casts a bad light onto you. And I guess I'm going to throw this question out to Luisa. Daniel's stepping away, and that's his right to. But we'll throw it to Luisa first. I've got stories, Kevin. You probably have stories. I know you have stories of people throwing accusations at you because of what you write. Luisa, have you ever run into that and felt
That's a pretty timely question, quite honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I'm getting a lot of criticism about a relationship in my book that's, what are inappropriate. People kind of like, oh, well, that shouldn't be used as a story. And it's so weird to me that no one would even think about the fact that happened to me, and that's why I'm writing about it. Like, it just seems to be an assumption that I'm using it as a plot device and exploiting that kind of situation, when really that's something I've dealt with a bunch of times in my life. So I'm writing about it from experience. That's my experience to interpret and write down on the page. So it is weird to me that the assumption is that I just sort of picked out something and exploited it for the idea of a plot, as opposed to, no, I'm working out my own stuff while I'm writing. So that's a kind of weird assumption to me to make, like, oh gosh, she just picked this out and she's exploiting it, and just for the sake of the story. And well, but it's my story, actually. I'm working it out on the page, just like writers work things out and filmmakers work things out on screen, etc. Like, it's such a weird assumption, a negative assumption to me.
Yeah.
Well, have you ever heard the concept, those who can do, those who can't teach? In this case, those who can write, those who can't write, criticize.
Yeah.
And of course, those who can't teach are admin.
Oh, you had to stick that one in there.
Yeah.
I had to.
I think the key thing that you put in there, Louisa, so it probably, again, the risk of being a crotchety old man. And what separates those who are writers and their writing happens to wander into extreme territory versus people who proudly say, I'm an extreme horror writer. When you said that you're working things out, I think that's the kicker for me, for all writing, is whether it's quiet horror. For example, Beast of 42nd Street by Preston Thessel is not an easy read. It is a hard read. It is basically.
I heard you mention that before, and I kind of want to read it.
I think I've got a copy of it right over there.
I think I've been at 42nd Street so many times.
It's about 42nd Street and all of its griminess and its grunginess.
Times Square, baby.
But it's a historical. It's a captured a historical moment, and it's Preston working his complicated feelings out about that. So when I hear the term "working things out," that's when I feel like the work is genuine versus I'm going to write the most extreme. That's when I start, again, I'm not to be a curmudgeon, but that's when I start raising my eyebrow a little bit when someone's like, I'm going to write the most extreme story imaginable. If you're writing something that's genuine and it turns out to be the most extreme story imaginable, then I'm willing to go along for that ride. But
there's a distinction there, and I think it gets into, do you turn the awful things into an empathetic exploration, or is it exploitation? I think that's where I kind of draw my own personal taste. I want to empathize instead of gawk. I don't want it to be a freak show thing. I want it to be something where I sympathize in that situation. I actually had a conversation with someone recently about writing horror, And what I mentioned was, for me, I guess I'm good at disassociating. I'm good at in a situation where someone comes to me and I was an RA in college for 3 years, and I've done counseling, and I've worked with teenagers and different youth groups, and I'm really good at being that person where it's like, okay, tell me the nitty gritty, tell me the ugly details of what's going on in your situation. I'm not gonna to jump down your throat and critique you. I want to hear it out and empathize with you. And I feel like that same personal quality kind of shows up in when I explore darker things in writing, where I don't want to jump to conclusions and jump all over the characters and then say, well, this isn't appropriate to talk about. I want to actually say, no, I'm going to sit here and listen and hear how ugly it was, and then let's explore this situation.
Right.
So it's a more empathetic approach. And I think empathy is a quality that's in a lot of horror writing that is underestimated by those who don't read horror. But I'm gonna throw the question to Daniel. Have you ever had situations where you feel critiqued by people because you write horror or you write something darker, and they seem to judge you personally for what you write?
100%, absolutely. The story was the moon and the mesa. It's in the Night Marchers and Other Strange Tales. And look, when you play with fire or you play with a hot button issue, you're going to take stuff. And that was it's a short story. I mean, it's a short story that opens up with children or grandchildren of Holocaust survivors are out kind of exacting an escalating kind of revenge, warranted or not, on people they feel things towards. And that's just the opening of the story. So, I got a lot of, whoa, hello, stop the presses, not allowed. Not allowed. And I'm just like, well, all right, well then don't read it. Don't buy it. Not allowed on your shelf, and it's my truth. I don't know if you call it horror. I don't know if you call it this. I don't know if you call it that. But even if it's not true, I was aiming for an emotional truth, and I've had that, and maybe that's okay if people, initially, like, I think there's something. I haven't thought a lot about it, but maybe there is something. I think there is something psychological about. We tend to have, maybe humans have a default of associating the author with the story, and sometimes we have to just give it a second to make that intellectual divide that the author and the story are different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think my approach has always been in conversations about horror and writing darker stuff, is try to get people to a point where they understand kind of the heart of it and why you go into those topics, why you would explore that. I've never encouraged people to read something they're uncomfortable with, but at least understand why someone else, it might be healthy for someone else to go there. I think some people, when they go through something terrible or they're just dealing with someone else's terrible experience, I think some people aren't prepared to explore that, and they pull back because the hurt is too strong. But I think other people are just equipped to sit and go through it and to lean into it to understand. And I think both, you have to understand there's a different experience of what's healthy for that different reader.
I think it's one of the strengths and beauties of why I'm a latecomer to the horror world, but why I love horror so much and why I think it's the best is it can do those things. I think stories have to entertain first. That's why I'm like, Luisa, you better hurry up and finish that second novel because it sounds so great. I love the 80s and the 70s, particularly the 70s. I think stories have to entertain us, and I just have a real feeling that Luisa's novel is going to entertain us in that way. But It sounds like there's also like another level there. Like, can you ride with the uncomfortableness? Like, the police brutality is a really awful thing. We'd rather not think about it. But while you're being entertained or while you're going for the ride of the story, horror can give you that too. And that's why I love it so much.
Tom, do you have any thoughts?
You know what? I'm going to keep this one simple. Daniel, Luis, I'm going to ask you a simple one. I mean, these two get very deep. What are some horror movies that have always been your favorites? You don't need to stick to one.
That's actually perfect.
Well, you know
Go ahead.
what? But like, I mean, ones that have always stuck with you. Maybe it's something that hit you as a child or something you really enjoy. So, Luisa, what are some horror movies that are your favorites?
Online?
You're muted. You're muted.
Oh, he's just sitting far away from the microphone.
No,
You
Luisa.
asked, about your favorite, favorite horror movies and
favorite horror movies, ones that just you can always watch over.
You can watch again and again.
I mean, but maybe when you were younger, they scared the hell out of you.
Yeah, and they may have scared you when you were younger, but maybe not now. But you just love to go back to them. Any of those kind of movies.
Yeah, The Thing. I will watch The Thing.
Oh, The Thing. Yes.
Kurt
Russell. Yeah.
I recently watched that.
One of my favorites. Since I actually made friends with Windows because I made it. The Thing works for me on so many levels, and it's just every time I watch it, I feel like isn't this amazing? This is the most incredible horror film. It works on so many levels, so many dynamics, great effects. Like one example for me,
special effects supervisor had a
Rob
heart
Bottin.
attack because of this.
Yeah, really. Tom just said that Rob Bottin had the special effects supervisor had a heart attack,
or somehow because of it,
making the movie because of it.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah,
he put a lot of effort into it.
Yeah, a lot of effort.
The special effects are incredible.
Mm-hmm.
It's so disturbing. The dynamics between the people, horror aside, are really disturbing. There's a bunch of times in the movie that I laugh out loud every time I watch it because it's so funny. It's like one of those movies that just engraved itself into my heart from the moment I first saw it, and I watch it a few times a year. Never gets old for me.
Yeah, I would say it's a top 10 horror movie for me, and I would say it's a top 5 special practical effects movie for me.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Do you know, I actually just found this out a couple of years ago when the guy reaches in and his arms get pulled off. I don't know if this is news to me, but John Carpenter actually hired someone with no arms. Put a Richard mask on him for like 1 second just so he could. That is dedication right there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Daniel, any classic horror movies that keep coming back to you and you keep drawing from?
I mean, I could just say exactly what Luisa said. The Thing might be my favorite horror movie, but also from that period, and one that's just great. An American Werewolf in London really did it for me as well. Just from like back then, and then in terms of like cult, the Boogans. In terms of like schlocky or like B movie, the Bogans. The Boogans, a weird one.
I never saw it, but I saw reviews for it. It might be a little goofy, but I like the whole the mines, the underground stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's
I can't say it's a good movie, but it's just one that like came from my childhood. So I have
you have homework, Tom. You have to watch that before our next.
Boogans. So what's great about that movie is there's like an extra features and the writers, producers, and actors have become friends, but they were just business partners when they were making that movie. And like you hear the writer being like, "Yeah, I pitched this folklore, and I totally bullshitted it all and made it all up and sold it to them as truth." Just like it's like
Shining from Jeffrey Oliver.
Also, in terms of classic, Suspiria is one that I could watch over and over again. And 2 modern classics.
Novel, it's pretty good.
I'd go It Follows and The Neon Demon are 2 of my modern.
Neon Demon. I like It Follows.
Neon Demons.
Never
I heard of all
seen
the production issues they've had.
Never saw it.
It was one of those, back when in the 80s when I was growing up, you saw the ads, but you couldn't see the movie because you were too young for it.
Gen X, that's the story of our life.
So
wandering through the video things and looking at all these garish covers, but mom and dad, there's no way they're going to rent this movie.
As you mentioned, Jeffrey Oliver mentioned The Shining. I've always said before I love both the book and the movie in different ways.
If you consider them as distinct entities, then yes,
they're both good.
Yeah. Hey, cheers to the Boogans, Steve. Cheers! I got a Boogans fan in the comments.
Yep. This one's maybe the most cliche, but for me, it's always Alien.
It's so good.
About that,
it's so good.
It's so good. That and Jurassic Park. I think for me, I love monster horror. I love suspense, and those.
The funny thing about that's not listed as horror, but it could be.
It could be, yeah. Those are both ones that I go back. I can always sit and watch them. I'm never down. Too busy to watch either of those movies. But those are ones that kind of really defined what drew me into writing. I guess suspense. I mean, horror is where I leaned into, but I would say suspense. I realized was the substance of storytelling that I loved the most.
Now I'm going to have to watch The Neon Demon, thanks to Great Blue Heron.
Yep.
So that's the neat.
It's totally Aikman-esque, Kevin. I find I looked at it with an Aikman-esque mindset. If you go in like that, you'll if you want certainty or if you want reason.
Oh, I recently watched Bloodbeat, and I'm like, I don't know what's happening right now. There's a ghost of a samurai possessing people, and they have sex, and they're killing people, and I don't know what's going on.
Wow.
So, if I'm going to go with classic films, so I'm going to go with 2 recognized classics and then a schlock classic.
Mm-hmm.
The first one would be Dark Knight of the Scarecrow. If you have not watched that, it's a made-for-TV movie, but it is a perennial rewatch for me when it comes to the Halloween. So Dark Knight
or Night of the Scarecrow?
Oh, it might be just Night of the Scarecrow. I thought it was Dark Knight of the Scarecrow.
The one with the thieves who
Dark Knight is Batman.
No. You're thinking of a different one. Dark Knight. Yeah, that's just Scarecrows. That's just, or maybe Field of Scarecrows. I know what you're talking about. No, Dark Knight of the Scarecrows, but where they vigilante murder this disabled man. Yeah.
It's completely different.
So good. Dark Knight of the Scarecrow. I recently rewatched Halloween 3 with the goat, Tom Atkins.
I got my picture with
you
him.
did. You got to meet Tom Atkins.
He was such an awesome dude.
I was microwaving it was a Scares the Care a couple years ago. I was microwaving my breakfast sandwiches while Tom Atkins talked to Joe Ripple behind me. That's the closest I got to talking to Tom Atkins. Well, Night of the Scarecrow, or not Night of the Scarecrow, Halloween 3, and then Demon Wind. You have to go look up Demon Wind.
You brought that one up a lot.
Tubi.
Yep.
It is like the quintessence of the bad 80s horror movie that's so good you just can't stop watching. It's got every single horror, and the practical effects are great and splattery. And I was talking with a publisher recently. They were going to inquire about the novelization rights to see if I could write a novelization of Demon Wind. And I'm like, I am so in. I would just rewatch that movie over and over. It's also remarkably self-aware for an 80s movie too.
All right, Tom, you threw out the question. What's your
what's yours?
I mean, first of all, growing up, I mean, I'm with Kevin in the old man category of 3 channels on your TV.
Well, don't forget the adult channel that would, like, if you clicked over to it, it would just like flicker.
Ah!
It would just like flicker. You'd be like,
Lisa, don't listen.
Like, what did I just see? I think I saw something, but I'm not sure what it was.
Growing up in New York, that was Channel J.
You see, there you go. There you go.
There you go. That channel.
They were literally, we had a box with letters, and it go to the Channel J at midnight. It turned.
Oh, yes, the Spice Channel. Steve knows what we're talking about.
Can I jump on this before
Yes.
we get something more?
Go ahead before I jump in.
I had the originals. I mean, my siblings would watch on the 3-channel station. The original Friday the 13th, the original Nightmare on Elm Street, the original Halloween, which as a child I was petrified of. But if there's one that stuck with me, because when you rewatch it, you enjoy the drama, the acting, has to be the original Jaws.
Jaws is great.
Now, when I first saw the movie, I didn't want to go to the toilet. I was so scared of being in the I thought Jaws would come up and bite my hiney. But it was good because I was thinking about, when we talked about real horror, I realized nature fights back.
Bob Ford is here.
Hey, Bob.
Finish up. I'll read Bob's comment in a second. It's a great comment, but finish up on Jaws.
So I just want to go back. Luisa and Daniel, I'm assuming you guys must have seen the original Jaws, yes?
Yes.
And if you, I mean, I'm worried about people like, oh, it's not that scary. I found it scary.
I mean, yeah.
I haven't gone to the bathroom since 1976.
Yeah, because in the end, the monster
Toast
is not
to that, Daniel. That's a great one.
The monster's not a monster. It just feeds, and
Yeah,
it's a force of nature. Yeah.
Yeah, in the end, and I know Peter Benchley. I read Peter Benchley's novel, of course, and he was upset that it gave sharks a bad rep. But they are the apex predator.
I mean, yeah.
And it's not like they're trying to go after humans, but it's like they can wreck us if they want to.
Should be on that first.
Right.
Yeah.
So in this situation, I mean, Jaws
sorry, I'm tipping over on you.
ticked every button with horror,
Yep.
with adventure, with drama, with great acting. And it's kind of funny because Spielberg thought it was going to be a big bomb, and nope.
So I throw out another classic for old-fashioned ones. I'm going to say The Birds. Which is actually based on a true story, but at least
when we go outside of Kevin's place, we have to deal with those.
I
chickens, they're not the same thing.
I love watching the Birds, but
hey, look at me.
Catch up in the comments here. We've got Jeffrey Oliver mentioned we had a black box. I had satellite dish, so
we had the black box.
Yep, I lived out in the country. We had a lot of the same things.
Oh, the satellite dish. My friend had a satellite dish, and there was a channel on the satellite dish.
So there was a lot of scrambly stuff back in the '80s. There was a lot of scrambly channels, but you had like
the satellite dishes were bigger than the house.
You had like the satellite dishes were huge, and you know channels 1 through 24, but on letters like A through Q through like V. Like you just had so many channels, and there was weird ones out there. Bob Ford. Yep. Bob Ford mentioned. I like the comment.
Bob Ford, whose novel The Dead Pennies is currently on pre-order for Cemetery Dance.
Yep. Bob Ford mentioned. Why has no one written a horror story about Channel J? I would say there was that.
There's one. There.
It leans into it, but there's that one on Sci-Fi Channel. There was one with the monster with teeth. What was that?
Channel Zero.
Channel Zero.
If there was
it leans into it a little bit, but I'm going to agree with you, Bob. Bob, you know what?
There should have been a season of Channel Zero that was all about Channel J.
Bob, I want you to write a horror story about Channel J.
Yeah.
But let's see, the one book, Beast of 42nd Street. Yep, another mention of Beast of 42nd Street.
Bob Ford says toilet seats that play the Jaws theme when you sit down would be a great idea.
Yep,
I
agree.
I have one that's near and dear to my heart, and that is The Stepfather, the original with Terry O'Quinn.
Oh yeah,
family dynamics. Yeah, amazing because it's a guy who marries into families, and when the kids disappoint him, he kills them. So for me, that was like, wow, that's a real commentary on family dynamics.
As teachers, we feel
guy mad and he kills you.
And Terry Quinn is pretty formidable.
Yeah, he really is. Yeah.
He's so great in those movies.
So I got affirmation from Great Blue Heron on The Birds, it being awesome. But Bob Ford says he's on it. He's working on his Channel J horror story, and he said, "Luisa, he is going to send it to you to make sure it works."
I have to say, I logged in a fair amount of time.
I think we all did. We all did.
You know who has to be in it?
What's that, Luisa?
Oh, just that Robin Bird would have to be, because it always.
Oh my God, Robin Bird!
Robin Bird in her spider web thingy, singing "Bang Your Box."
Oh, Louise! Oh my!
I was giving.
Oh, okay. I don't want to know. All right then.
I'm helping.
Louise,
he wants to write a book about it.
I remember
Okay, so I have to give a shout out to Steve. Steve, this comment.
Horror DNA. Go follow Horror DNA. Go to their website, horrordna.com.
Steve, this blesses my heart. So I grew up in the backwoods of the Appalachian Hills and stuff like that. So there is no cable. There's just the big satellite dish. So that was part of my childhood, is that the big giant satellite dish. And Steve mentions that he was visiting family in West Virginia, and they described by the big satellite dishes. By law, we cannot remove the big one. It's the state flower. I have to tell my parents that, because that was part of my childhood. So thank you. I love that description of the giant satellite dish as the state flower.
Bob Ford is very much looking forward to the research for his Channel J story. So. So I think we have done really well here with considering our technical difficulties, and Chuck's laptop, which we'll be using from now on, is starting to run down on its last legs.
We are at
2%, which is a perfect place to end, I think.
Yeah, let's see this. Yeah, we're at 10% and 5%. There's a battery in the screen and a battery in the keyboard.
All right.
So we're at like 5% battery.
So for everyone who came in tonight, and of course we're going to blast a newsletter out on Monday with this link to let everybody know to come watch it and to buy both Bad Moon Rising and Serpent Shadow. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for weathering our technical difficulties.
Real quick, Luisa Cologne.
Cologne.
I've been saying your first name all night. Luisa Cologne and Daniel Braun. This screen is very dark. Luisa Cologne and Daniel Braun. Thank you, our authors who are guests tonight.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Who watched Robin Bird?
Real quick before we lose our recording, Luisa, Daniel, mention your books that you have out just recently.
Very quickly, please.
Oh, Bad Moon Rising.
Oh, we got the Serpent Shadow
You have your
and
Night Marchers.
Night Marchers and Other Strange Tales, both from Cemetery Dance.
You had yours right at the ready. Mine was was like over there.
All right, looks like we're signals dying.
Well,
thanks, everyone.
We are going unmuted. We're Kevin's computer. There may be some echo, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys,
Thank you.
for having me so much.
Have a good night.
Bye.
She's wolves. They all logged off. Oh, okay. One and
You guys are still live. You're still live. Be careful.